Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast, the latest in a series of conversations with some of the key leaders and influencers from across the vast UK infrastructure sector. My name is Anthony Oliver, and I'm going to lead today's discussion as we talk about the challenge and opportunities of reforming the UK rail network, and specifically ask how this vast and complex national asset can be effectively and successfully transitioned back under public control and management. A bit of background. In May 2021, the Shapps Plan for rail set out the government's plan for the transformation. In short, the plan will see control of the rail network, trains and operations pass from the current fragmented and largely private sector run ownership to a new public body known as Great British Railways. This will own the infrastructure, receive the fare revenue, run and plan the network, and set most fares and timetables. Network Rail, the current infrastructure owner, will be absorbed into this new organisation, as will many functions from the Rail Delivery Group and the Department for Transport. It's been described as one of the most ambitious changes to our railways in a generation. While no longer in control, the private sector will remain critical to the asset management operations and incentivised to run safe, high-quality, punctual services, manage costs, attract more passengers, and innovate. So, no pressure there. The Great British Railways transition team is now preparing the ground, working with government to change the culture and approach to rail investment, and as they put it, getting the whole railway thinking commercially through reform. The challenge is to embrace this new way of working and bring Great British Railways into being. It's a huge task, and to discuss the challenges that lie ahead, my guest today is Anit Chandarana, Lead Director of the GBR Transition Team, the man very much in the hot seat when it comes to leading those vital changes. Anit, welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast.
Thank you, Anthony. Great to be here and to give an opportunity to have a bit of a conversation about the work we're doing.
Brilliant. Well, I tried to set the scene in terms of the plan for the future of Great British Railways. From your perspective, I mean, did I get it right? There's a lot of detail in there, but where's the transition team 2 years on from the Shapps Williams review in terms of the ambition to create that once in a generation reform?
Yeah, not a bad job, Anthony. Well done. Good summary.
Well, that's a relief.
I think the key bits that I'd kind of draw out, I think, first of all, in terms of plans and where they're coming together, we do absolutely see GBR as kind of this guiding mind, bringing the industry together. Importantly, we see current partners in the industry continuing to play their part in the future. And in some work we've begun to do, we're beginning to act a bit like a guiding mind in some aspects. So if you look at the work, for example, we've been doing on revenue and understanding the revenue drivers of the industry, understanding the daily revenue patterns that are happening in the industry, actually that is beginning to bear some fruit. And similarly, thinking about a long-term strategy for rail, what we might want to set as a strategic context. So we've got those bits of work coming together. But it's important that as we think about the industry, this concept of a guiding mind, not a controlling mind, is something maybe we should explore a bit as we carry on. But okay. Overall, not a bad job.
Great. No, well, the aim is to transform the way in which the rail sector works. I mean, bringing together the track and the train through a network of regional railway centres. The idea is to deliver a simpler, better railway for everyone. It's ambitious. From what you've seen today, what makes you think that you can succeed?
Well, I think the first thing to say is it's not just me. There is huge support from across the industry that actually bringing track and train together will create simplification. Today we have a very fragmented industry, and in any fragmented industry you have to have arrangements and systems of how those fragments come together, which in itself creates complexity. So if we can eliminate many of those fragments, bring them together, that will have the impact of simplicity. And whether it is supply chain, whether it is people who currently operate trains on the freight networks or the passenger networks, whether it's Network Rail, there is this really clear common consensus that what Keith wrote about in bringing the railway together, track and train together, is a smart, sensible thing to be doing at this moment. So we are not lacking that support.
Okay.
And interestingly, where people perhaps have concerns about aspects of the model, when pushed, they're not able to come up with an alternative plan B.
Right. Yeah. But the consensus is, I suppose, across the rail sector that this is a moment to actually embrace that change. We can talk a bit more about you and your role in a moment, but I understand you've taken up a temporary 6-month secondment with the DFT. That's bringing the GBR transition team and the DFT team closer together. Is that because it was identified that actually from the government perspective there needs to be silos broken down? I mean, what does it involve? Why is it necessary?
Sure. Well, I think the way to look at that question is, what's the day job of that role, and then what is the reform agenda of that role? So the day job. So I'm going to be seconded to the role of Director General Rail Investment Group, and actually for many of your listeners, the Rail Investment Group is a common point of contact into the Department for Transport, because it's the function that clients the large enhancements pipeline of work, 2 billion, in excess of 2 billion spend a year. So I'm going to be leading that team as the current Director General doing that. David Hughes is departing to take on a new role. But actually, as well as that, working with Conrad Bailey, who's the Director General, who'll be my partner Director General there is a huge opportunity to get DFT ready for the change that's coming in the new industry state and progressing the agenda. So actually, it's probably something we would have done at some point in this journey, but the opportune moment came at this point.
Because I suppose what they're saying is that while the delivery side needs to prepare itself for this change, so does the government and the DFT.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you think about the very definite role that we will need DFT to continue to do in the future, which is understanding the biggest elements of government strategy. What does government really want from railways? They are ultimately still going to be the biggest funder of the railways, so the government should have a big say. And we need a conduit into the government, and the DFT will continue to play that part. But equally, as you mentioned in your intro, there are aspects of the work the DFT does today that in the future will be part of the guiding mind. And by thinking about that now, we get the DFT system ready. So actually, it's a pretty powerful aspect of really leveraging and making sure that we stay on the journey of reform as we go forward. It's a really powerful signal from Bernadette, the PermSec.
Well, I quoted a phrase you've been using earlier. What do you mean by getting the whole railway thinking commercially through reform?
So by that, I think a couple of aspects. If you look at the way the industry is organised today, we split the biggest cost decisions from the biggest revenue decisions. And not very many organisations, whether they're business organisations, charities, government departments, would put that separation in play. And by commercial, it is thinking about those both aspects together. So how do you take cost decisions that maximise your revenue opportunities? How do you take revenue decisions that maximise your opportunity for efficiency and cost, just like any other organisation will do? But then also comes in the customer aspect of that, because ultimately we're all here to drive people to use the railways, whether that's passengers, freight customers, and for me, commerciality is the bringing together of those two aspects.
Well, and I suppose one of the challenges before, perhaps what stopped change before, is that it's actually identifying who the ultimate customers are through that entire fragmented process. Is that going to become clearer?
Will it become clearer? I think we can put a much greater emphasis on that, the end customer in that conversation. And I think the other opportunity we have is, today, and Keith really was very clear when he was doing his work, we have some brilliant people working in this industry, committed to the rail. Your past podcasts have shown the passion that people have for this industry.
Absolutely,
But what we also have is people working to misaligned incentives, working hard to achieve the incentives in their own part of the industry. But when we add all of that together, it doesn't give us the right cohesive whole.
Okay, so I mean, getting to the nub, I suppose, of what you're trying to achieve, it's complex. There's a lot of fragmentation. There's a lot of people with a huge amount of passion to do things better. So, from what you've seen, what has stopped better collaboration in the past?
So, I think the misaligned incentives are at the heart of that, and it's when those misaligned incentives are so misaligned that it creates conflict within the industry. Because people working hard to achieve their organisation's objectives, setting those incentives, do what is the rational thing. And it's really difficult to overcome those misaligned. So fundamentally it is that. Over time, what has also happened in this industry is that people who grew up working in the industry when it was a single industry had that muscle memory of thinking about it as a system. Over time, we've trained people away from that, and those two things together create conflict and mean that in the end, our passengers and our freight customers end up being the at the end of that position. So, putting those two things together, creating incentives that create common cause, a common driver, I think will be a massive opportunity.
Yeah. And getting back, it's a phrase that's been used in a lot of podcasts before on a lot of different subjects, getting back to a systems approach.
Correct, absolutely.
Yeah. We described it as one of the most ambitious rail reforms in a generation. I presume you'd agree from the work you've been doing, it's pretty ambitious. It's going to require huge changes in approach. We've mentioned quite a lot of that already. I mean, you're bringing together what you described as this whole industry profit and loss. You touched on it a bit earlier, but what do you actually mean by bringing together the profit and loss?
Well, so I think there's two things to talk about in that. There's the physical tool of bringing, of putting the finances of the industry together, so that on a line of route basis, for example, you can really understand the revenues that are being driven in that location. You can understand the costs of servicing those revenue streams, and you put it together, just like Sainsbury's would do in every one of its stores.
Right. Yeah.
The real importance of that, though, is how it can drive decision making. So when we take cost decisions, we understand the impact. We can measure the impact on revenue, and vice versa. Just doing the tool on its own isn't going to change anything. Doing the tool that allows people to make the right decisions and understand the impact of their decisions, and also take corrective action when things don't go right, is the fundamental opportunity.
So if a bit of engineering work takes too long, or there's something goes wrong with it, then there is a tangible link between the profit and loss of that operation, rather than just being passed off somewhere else as somebody else's problem.
I think that's right, and I think the thing to really emphasise there is there are times where there will be no easy answers to the difficult decisions we've got. We know that lots of businesses, the railway included, there are trade-offs to be made, and what we are not able to do today effectively is make those trade-offs seeing the whole picture. This allows us to take those trade-offs, understanding some of those difficult decisions within that complete picture.
So the likely impact on the industry today, I mean, it could make, I suppose, the delivery side more risk averse. It could make the industry more willing to embrace innovation. And I suppose you'd like to go the latter. What stops people going down the former path of becoming slightly more risk averse?
So there is. You're right. There is that risk, and I think it comes back to being clear collectively about what we're trying to achieve, the constraints that we have around us. I'm not a particularly. I'm not good with my historic references, but I'm sure somebody at one point said something like constraints are the mother of innovation, and that is true. Brilliant engineers in constrained environments come up with brilliant solutions. What this industry P&L will do is describe some of those constraints, but also set ambition about what do we want to do for revenue, how do we do it, and actually done correctly, that constrained environment is what will unleash the creativity that I know is in this industry.
Right. I mean, it is about creating a big shift in culture. It's a stronger commercial and customer-focused mindset is a phrase I think you've used. But you also say that you're designing Great British Railways in a way that bakes in the right incentives. So how do you describe those incentives? I mean, how do you move beyond, I suppose, the lowest cost approach?
So I think first of all, if we those incentives, if we start by thinking about putting the customer at the heart of what we're doing, there are a set of incentives around how we drive customer use of the railways. Again, whether that's passenger or whether that's freight users, how customer satisfaction then drives those things. We've got a lot to learn from people who do this day in, day out in various other industries, like the airline industries, like the retailers. But then there's also another set of incentives, which is around the cost environment we work within and reducing the reliance on taxpayers by delivering efficient industries. So it's a balanced approach to those incentives that looks at both of those aspects and brings them together to deliver the ultimate outcome. Industries do this around the world, in the UK, all over the place. It's not easy, but it's not rocket science either.
No, I mean, clearly the culture across the rail sector, for many good reasons, largely to do with safety, I imagine, is one that resists change. I mean, how do you overcome that resistance to change?
So I'm not sure I describe it as resist change. I think earlier on where you described where the kinds of things that stop collaboration is more where we are, and I think fragmentation is a large chunk of that, which allows optionality sometimes in some of the changes that we want to put through, and also fundamentally some of those difficult decisions that we talk about. There are many ways to resolve the problems we've got today. But sometimes some of those solutions work against each other rather than working with each other. So therefore, you need a guiding mind that says, in overall terms, this is the guidance and the direction we want the industry to take. I think there is also something here about, at the other end of that scale, people given challenges come up with brilliant solutions to those challenges. So there is also something about how we empower people to do the right thing in the moment. And remind people that if you are doing a piece of track maintenance work in Stroud on Saturday morning, that actually doing it in a way that drives customer thought in that process is what ultimately we want you to do.
Okay. Let's talk about you, Anit. Your background is in financial management, but you're no stranger to the railways, having worked at Network Rail for 19 years, first as financial controller and then as chief of staff. I mean, is reform of the railways something you've been hankering for over several decades?
No, I wouldn't say that at all, because I absolutely, I absolutely fell into the job that I had was to maximise Network Rail's position. And particularly as a finance individual, and therefore I can say I was part of the problem for very many years. And it was only as I begun to see the bigger picture that I began to recognise that my own actions in those earlier years were not customer centric. We're not really thinking about that. So once I saw that picture, then I started thinking about the opportunity, and of course. The 2018 timetable issues that we had, like for very many other people, really brought that home to me, and the sense of how we let customers down really was the point where I started going, there's a better way.
So that work on the inside at Network Rail, that's given you a really clear view of where you need to be taking this new railway.
Yeah, absolutely, no question.
Yeah, I mean, you've also worked recently in the NHS as a non-exec director and chair of the audit committee at East London NHS Foundation Trust. Okay, GBR isn't entirely about public sector control, but what extent do you think you can bring this experience to bear with rail reform?
So it's a number of things. One, frankly, there's a bit of solidarity to know that the rail industry isn't the only one that suffers from some of these aspects, and it's always better to know you're not alone in those experiences. But actually, some of my role in a foundation trust is right at the other end of the industry to my role here in GBRTT, which is kind of a whole industry big oversight role. Whereas in the foundation trust, right at the other end of the scale, where we're seeing kind of some of the daily challenges that particular foundation trust has in trying to deliver services to its patients and service users, and it's a really good reminder, continuing the work that I'm doing today, that if we're going to deliver better customer outcomes, it's not going to be from just the people who are setting the structure of the future industry. Actually, it's the people who daily interact with customers that are really going to change the shape of the industry.
Right, yeah. And of course, you've worked also in the private sector at Shell and Sainsbury's, so you're very aware that the private sector has a huge role in driving things forward. I mean, is the private sector better at delivering commercially led strategies?
So I wouldn't necessarily use the word better, but there are definitely aspects of our industry where the private sector is better placed to bring skills and experience to bear in delivering that. Often agility is, for example, one of those aspects because of the really present pressure from shareholders delivering returns. But equally, if you think about our railways, some of our railways, in fact, the vast majority of our railways, in their own right, do not deliver a return. They're there to deliver a bigger return for wider society, and therefore, what I think is right in our present position is a really sound public-private partnership that gets the best of both of those worlds. Is really the opportunity we have as we go forward.
Okay, it's certainly not just about ruling out the private sector. It's actually working really closely with them.
Absolutely.
I mean, clearly you're passionate about the railways. I mean, which lines do you use? Which routes do you love the most?
Well, like many people in the railways, I didn't join the industry all those years ago thinking I was going to have a full career in the railways, but it does get under my skin. It got under my skin like it did lots of other people, and that's really about that socioeconomic role that the railways plays is what does it for me. But I live in Watford, so my daily journey is to Waterloo, and that's a really good example of what the railway enables people to do. I can leave my front door and I'm in Waterloo in the best journey times, 40 minutes from leaving my front door. Worst, apart from when it really goes wrong, the worst is 50 minutes. Can you imagine trying to travel into the middle of London from Watford in that kind of timescales by any other mode? It's not possible. But then there's also the leisure aspect, and one of my favourite journeys is down the East Coast from Edinburgh to London, where on the one hand it's a really picturesque journey particularly as you come across the borders and you come across that East Coast, but you also go through some really iconic cities of starting in Edinburgh, going through York, ending up in London. And the sights it sees, and it just brings home to you what the railway's really about. Yeah,
I mean, I think everyone loves a good railway journey, and I suppose your challenge and no pressure is just to make sure that it's reliable, it's affordable, and that it's and of course it's safe. So the role of the private sector, as you said, is going to be critical. But you say also you're striving to create an environment in which the rail supply chain can better innovate and freight customers are able to adapt for their markets. How do you do that? How do you make sure that it is a private sector friendly place to be?
Yeah, correct. Well, look, when we think about the supply chain in particular, and by that, we're talking about the private sector that operates in the industry other than train operators, passenger operators, is the normal kind of split there. So the first thing I think about then is being really clear with those supply chain partners who we're asking to invest their shareholders' funds, not just in the short term, but the long term. And I think one of the best things we can do for that is the work we're doing on the long-term strategy for rail, because that gives a long-term view as to what the railway will want from its supply chain partners. And that in turn allows the management of those organisations to talk to their shareholders and convince them why they can invest in the railway. Hand in hand with that, when we talk about things like freight, we have a massive opportunity to increase freight usage, rail freight usage in the UK. It has carbon sustainability opportunities for your supply chain partners, those organisations that want to move goods in the industry. And so one of the things we're putting together is a freight growth target right now, which will be an ambitious target, because by having that target, the industry understands what we need to do to deliver that target, and also the investment that's going to be required in the industry to do that. And what's really clear is that we have worked hard with those supply chain partners over the last year, and this is what they tell us they want. It's not just us sitting in an ivory tower with this figment of imagination.
I mean, it is going to mean procuring differently. It's going to mean building better commercial partnerships as a really important part of this actual, the levers for change. I mean, but you can't have a relationship with every part of the supply chain. I mean, how do you intend to work with large businesses to pass that collaborative culture down through the SME supply chain? So
SME is a really really good point. I mean, I've run an SME business, and I understand some of the frustrations of that. And in the work we did last summer, our SME partners, I think, were more honest about their experiences in the industry than I have seen them previously be, for fear of kind of cutting off their work. And it's clear that we collectively have a lot more work to do in terms of how we engage the supply chain. How we one of them described to me that we actually have to deal with what they described as the cat's cradle of nonsense of how they engage with us, the complexity we put in front of them in terms of engaging with the industry. And of course, we talked about innovation earlier on. A lot of innovation comes from those smaller organisations. So I think we're going to have to find a way of direct engagement with the SME community, but also working very hard with those tier one suppliers and being very demanding of what do we need to change in our collective cultures that really encourages those SME organisations.
Okay. Well, I suppose finally, there's a lot of work that you've got to do. There's a lot of change that the industry's got to go through. So sum it up for me. What does the future of Great British Railways look like from the perspective of the rail passenger? What can we expect to see differently?
So one of my most instrumental journeys has been an anecdote. So I was travelling to Manchester, and a passenger, and this was when I was in the infrastructure projects division of Network Rail, said to me, "So what do you do?" And I started describing what I did, and very quickly they got bored, because what I was describing was the detail and why I love what I did in the railways. And he said to me, "Actually, what I just want to know is this train going to get to Manchester on time?" And I think there is a real simplicity and really good understanding of what passengers want. They don't care how we organise ourselves. Neither should they care how we organise ourselves. What they care about is how we enable their lives. And when we have an industry that all comes in under that simple message, then I think we've got an industry that is doing the right thing.
And that will make it a better place to work or a harder place to succeed?
So I think it should make it a better place to work. And the reason I think it should make it a better place to work is that simplicity of message, of that's what we're all here to do, means that every time we do something, whether you're in a station helping customers or you're thinking about the long-term strategy of the rail, if we allow our people to think about that simple objective and what their role is in maximising that opportunity, I think their lives become simpler. But also, when you've got an industry that is joined up, I just see a wealth of opportunity and growth for individuals to work across the system and really growing their own capability and at the same time having that real purposefulness of what we're here to do.
Great stuff. That's a great point to finish on. And I can see that you're genuinely very, very excited about this huge opportunity that lies ahead.
No, if I weren't genuinely excited, all the challenges we've had, I'd have given up a long time ago.
Okay, well, thanks so much for joining me today on the Infrastructure Podcast. It is a really interesting set of challenges that you've got there, for sure. So thanks very much for sharing your thoughts and for joining me today on the podcast.
No, my pleasure at all, and thank you, Anthony, for organising both today, but also what I think has been a really interesting series of conversations with people. So keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. No, as I say, it hasn't finished yet. It carries on weekly, yes. So thanks for joining me today. As I say, though, it's all we've got time for today. But there will be, continue to be more from the Infrastructure Podcast, more guests to talk to as we continue to probe the big issues faced across the sector. And if you haven't done so already, do check out the Infrastructure Podcast website, www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you will find background information to this podcast, but also the latest podcasts to listen to and to share. So thanks for joining us today. Thanks again to Anit, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.